Hi there folks, and welcome to Synth Arc of Redemption. I am Patrick from Adelaide Electro Synth Pop Live Quartet, Only Objects, and we're here to talk about synthesizers that are unloved, forgotten, or considered to be a little bit strange, and why you should care about them. And this time we're going to be looking at the Omnichord. What a piece of kit. Now, at first glance, you might think that this is just not a real instrument, but a musical toy. And if you think that, that's fine, because just like conservatives and people who think that pineapple belongs on pizza, you're wrong. Entirely wrong, completely 100% wrong. So, let me tell you about the Omnichord. Before we go any further discussing the Omnichord, or I should say the Omnichord System 2, this is a later model, the OM-84, so named because it can play a staggering 84 different types of chords. If you have any real question about the sort of street cred on these things, Bowie played one and loved the damn thing, as well as Brian Eno, Daniel Lanois, all kinds of other producers as well are big fans of these guys for being a songwriting and studio tool. But what on earth is this beige box of tricks? In its own way, this is a very strange, very early 80s, very electronic take on an old folk instrument called an auto-harp, where you essentially would have a series of strings and a number of buttons that would press the strings in configurations for different chords, thus making them very approachable for folk music. In a way, this does the same thing. It has dedicated buttons that will play different types of chords, and you can combine them to play unusual chords as well. And really, it's like if you've ever seen one of those rolltop organs that you used to get in as home entertainment units in the 1970s, this is kind of that in a much smaller package. So there's a combination of factors here. As I said before, we've got our chord buttons, so let's check those out if we were to play a simple little... Combined with that, we've also got a dedicated strum bar here, which is probably the most intriguing part of the unit. So if we play, say, an E flat 7, we can then strum like so. And whatever you strum here will be in the same key. So if we change it to, say, a C minor, and we can balance out these levels as well. So if we want less sustain and less of the chords, we can turn that down and just get it's a nice bit on top here, or in fact turn the chords all the way off. Very pretty, as you can see. We've also got, in true 80s style, we've got our accompanying drum section that we can turn on if you want a bit of rock. Or disco, we can do that as well. Tempo's sweepable, no MIDI on this one, but they did introduce MIDI much later. And you can even put in the walking bass line as well if you want. Don't really use that one that much. And even there's a chord memory section, which largely I'm not using much myself, but it does make this wonderful beep. There it is again. One more time. And then you can actually play the chord buttons as a chromatic keyboard down the bottom here. When these came out, they were really marketed as an instrument that anyone can play, much like the auto-harp was. In fact, if you look at the book that came with it, and if you guys can source one of these, they're great fun to look through. This is the manual for the Omnichord System 2. It's full of instructions about how you can essentially be a whole band out of the box, and how you can play different tunes, and there's even some notation here to learn how to play like Do, Re, Mi, and the theme from Star Trek, which I think is glorious, and it comes with a songbook as well. So what makes these things such an interesting songwriter's tool? Well, for me, it comes down to the dedicated chord buttons and everything you can do with them. Sure, we've got your standard chords of major, minor, and seventh. Let's start playing some keys together, and we can get some more unusual chords, more kind of jazzy or spicy chords. A major seventh, a minor seventh, an augmented, and a diminished. So suddenly we can start bringing in chords that we wouldn't typically think of when we're talking about kind of pop music production. and it's easy just to sort of jump around the buttons and find some interesting sounds. The barrier to entry is very, very low, which is super cool. We're now seeing lots of MIDI controllers that do this as well. The chord bot was a big one, but you know, these guys were at it first. The first one of these came out in 1981, which is pretty staggering for the time that it was released in. So what else can I tell you about the Omnichord? Well, as I said, this is a System 2 Omnichord that plays 84 chords. The original one only played, I think, 27, and then they redefined them a couple of times since then as well. The Q chord is the most recent one that's been added there. The largest collection of these is owned by Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords, who's a huge fan, and you'll hear them all over the place cropping up in little recordings, including on my band, Own the Objects. You can hear this one just at the start of our single Sway, where it's actually got the chord is completely off, and you just get a nice little... So you can go check that out, onlyobjects.bandcamp.com if you're interested. For the last bit of today, I just wanted to show you guys some of the really interesting results you can get with this once you take the output and start plugging it into a few guitar pedals and shifting around the tone a touch. Should point out as well, you can also power this with batteries. I believe they're C-types. It takes about 8, and mine, like every single other one of these, appears to be missing the battery cover. Anyway, let's plug it in. Let's check out some tones and see what interesting sounds we can get. Okay, so first of all, I should point out that if you have one of these, I really hope you have one of these wonderful grey modular cases for them. They are glorious plastic and so very, very 80s. Anyway, so here's the Omnichord. And I'm just running it through, I've got a delay and a reverb set up, so even just a little bit of reverb can make it sound pretty lively. Like most synths, all it needs is just that little bit extra, so... Spooky. We had a bit of delay in there as well, we can start getting some pretty funky tones. And you can get some nice sounds with the chords as well, especially once again with the mix up full. Got those Pink Floyd vibes. So some time warp delays can give you some really interesting results as well. So if you're into your kind of ambient or dark ambient experimentals, we can start bringing some of the drums in for interesting results. Using like a moving tape delay or something will give you some pretty funky results as well. And actually, if you turn all the other sounds off and just go for the dedicated keyboard, you can get a nice bit of sort of Blade Runner vibes going on as well. And the best bit when you turn it off again. So anyway, there's an overview of some of the sounds that you can make with the Omnichord and a couple of guitar pedals. So that's the Omnichord. It's a great bit of kit. It makes weird noises. It makes unusual chords. You can use it for songwriting. You can bury it on albums. You can run it through guitar pedals, mangle it, and make an ambient record out of it. You can do all of those things. But what you shouldn't do is overlook this great beige box of joy. Anyway, if you do want to check out the sound of one, don't forget Sway at onlyobjects.bandcamp.com. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in for Synth Arc of Redemption. I'm Patrick. Peace and electronic music. We'll catch you next time.